That audience was weird. I mean, it was just a bad audience. Please like, comment, and subscribe. What's up, everybody? Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. In case anybody is wondering, Snoopy Bijou is currently enjoying a Whimzees Alligator. Check out Whimzees in the Amazon affiliates link down below if you're interested in getting Whimzees Alligators for your dog. Okay, so we're back to talking about comedy, and here's the thing with stand-up and bad audiences. Last night, I was in the green room with my friend Quinn Dahle. If you're not familiar with Quinn Dahle, very funny comedian. You should definitely check him out. He happened to drop in for a guest set on the show that I was headlining last night at the LA Comedy Club. And at some point, we ended up talking about bad audiences. And Quinn was saying that, you hear that there's never a bad audience, but sometimes there is a bad audience. And I have to say that is something that I agreed with him on, but we both definitely agreed that in a lot of cases, you can turn it around. So I would say 95 to 97% of audiences you can turn around, and then there's that other 5 to 3%. But then I'm kind of torn on this, and I'm going to be honest about that too, because I've been in rooms that I swore were just dead and I hadn't even done well in, and then one comic goes up and is just a more seasoned comic or somebody that has that je ne sais quoi on that particular night and just destroys this room, and the audience loves them. So I don't know how set I am on not every audience can be turned around, because sometimes I feel like maybe you just don't have the key yet, or maybe you don't, because I can guarantee you can be in the worst room ever, and if Dave Chappelle walks in the room, I highly doubt he's going to have a bad set, even though I have seen Bill Burr bomb before. And I'm not talking shit about Bill Burr. It's just facts are facts, and I have seen Bill Burr legit bomb, where he did the mic snap like open micers do, and he was like, this is weird, you guys are weird. It was Latino night at the Laugh Factory, and they just weren't really feeling him. So maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, you can let me know what you think down below in the comments, but I'm going to tell you guys how I think it works out with bad audiences, weird audiences, however you want to word that. First off, I'll tell you that I think that being a stand-up comic is similar to being a DJ in the way that you have your jokes, which I look at as like your songs. So it's up to you to figure out in what order you're going to play those songs, because different parties will want to start off different ways. Like some people will want to start off with you being more just introducing yourself type of thing. And some audiences want you to just jump straight to it. Some audiences want you to play with them a little bit. Some audiences are celebrating something, or there's a big enough party in the audience that they're celebrating something. And then it's your job to do something with that, to figure out how you're going to make that work. And so I feel like in a lot of cases, you want to make sure that you aren't too rigid about your set. Like, that's very important in my opinion when it comes to stand-up. Be willing to do what it is they want to do, because as I've discussed before, it is their Saturday night. So yes, it's your show, but it's also their Saturday night. Like the other night, what happened on Thursday night was I was having a conversation backstage about something that was kind of heavy and kind of important with another comedian. And when I got called on stage, I really wasn't in the right headspace to go on stage quite yet. And it would have taken me just a minute longer if I had had that, but I didn't have it. I mistimed the conversation. And so I got on stage and I started a lot harder than I wanted to start. I went at them a little bit stronger than I probably should have. And so they started off, there were points where I felt like they're weird, but like in my head, I really was like, no, this was you messing up. This was you making a mistake. Maybe you should have taken a minute longer to collect yourself, or whatever happened, it happened. And it's your job to fix this. And outwardly, at a point, I started having a really good set with them. And anybody that saw that set would tell you that it was a really good set. But me knowing what my sets are usually like, and me knowing the reactions that I'm supposed to get to the jokes that I was doing, I knew that I wasn't doing as well with that audience as I would usually do. And it really was, from the beginning, I had gotten off on the wrong foot with them. I had come out with the wrong even tone, tone of voice. And so I really hadn't given them a fair chance. So for me to be mad at the audience at that point would have been completely unfair, and also would have been taking away the accountability that I actually needed to take in order to become a better comic. And I may be the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world, but I don't necessarily think that I'm perfect, and I don't think I'm infallible when it comes to stand-up. Sometimes lessons you've already learned, you have to learn again in stand-up, and it's sometimes like that with life too, so that makes sense. But there are times where it's like, I've already been through this with myself. And so what I'll usually do after situations like that is I'll continue to think about them, and not in a I'm going to kill myself sort of way, because a lot of times comics get into that, like, depressed, I bombed, or I didn't, and I definitely didn't bomb. But, and I would tell you guys if I did, because I've often told people, because people will be like, Ty, you never bomb. And it's like, no, I rarely bomb now, but when I bomb, I bomb. And one day we'll talk about bombing and some of my stories from that, because I definitely have bombed before. So let me not pretend like that's the case. But just on that particular night, Thursday, it wasn't that kind of situation. Like I said, I turned it around and made it a really good set. But I felt like I hadn't gotten my rhythm the entire set. So for me, because of what was going on in my head, it wasn't a good set. And like I said, I'll give myself time to think about it, and I'll really take it apart in a non-emotional, analytical way, which is what I think a lot of comedians need to do. And if you're not doing that, you're not going to grow, because at a point you got to remember that this is a job, and it's not the audience's job to be a good audience. It's your job to be a good comedian. It's not the audience's job to necessarily be in the mood. It's your job to get them in the mood. Like, that's just a part of the job if you want to be good at it, if you want to continue to get booked. It's just the way that it works. If you want to get paid, this is something that's probably very important for you, because while we would like to blame the audience, the booker, if you have a series of shows that are bad like that, isn't going to book you again. Then they're not going to be like, oh, well, you just had a string of bad audiences. It's like, no, at a point, you're just supposed to kill it, and that's just what's supposed to happen. So when it comes to that, it's very important that you take your emotions out of it and your I hate the audience attitude out of it, and just look at it and take it apart in your head in a very productive way. Not beating yourself up, not I'm the worst person in the world and I don't deserve to do this. None of that. That's all negative and unproductive. What you really want to think about is, where did I lose them? Was I being too rigid? Was I forcing something? Because sometimes something as small as that is what will mess up and derail your entire set, is that you have this way that you think your set is supposed to go. You've written it a particular way, and that's the only way you want to do it. But at a point, they'll have heard too much about a particular subject, or they just won't be feeling a particular subject. That's something that's happened to me as a gay comedian, because sometimes now audiences are more and more open to it. But there were definitely times when I first started when the audience would get to like, okay, we've heard enough about being gay. It's just where it's at. And I could tell that that's what they were feeling just by paying attention to their body language. This, again, is where some of the other lessons I mentioned in some of the other videos are going to come in, because if you're actually paying attention to their body language, you can tell a lot of times. Like, you'll notice a shift and you'll be like, okay, that looks like this audience has had enough of this. And if you're really in tune with your audience and you're paying attention and you're present in the room, it may sound like I'm just talking, like saying this, but you'll know what I'm talking about. And different comedians will also tell you this. You can tell when an audience has had enough of a particular subject, when they're ready to move on, or when they're just bored, or you can tell these things. And so if you're like, I've got to do these bits right now, this particular way, and then you force them to the point where not only are they now bored, but now you've been pushing the issue, so they feel like, well, now I don't even like you because you're trying to push this particular issue on me or this particular subject on me, and I'm done with it, and you're still talking about it. So don't be too rigid, and don't be afraid to just jump to another joke, jump to another subject. Talk about something that's going on in the room. Figure it out. Figure out how you're going to make that situation work for you. And like I said, if you already did it and now it's in the past, think about that and think about how you're going to handle it for next time, because there will always be a next time. And the more you think about it, the better prepared you're going to be for the next time. But like I said, don't dwell and don't be hard on yourselves. Remember, this is a learning process, just like anything else. So think about it in the most productive way possible so you're ready to handle it the next time it comes up. So like I said, don't be too rigid when it comes to that kind of thing. Don't be afraid to change the subject. You're not compromising yourself as a comedian if you decide to not go on with certain jokes because you don't think the audience is necessarily feeling it. There's plenty of other subjects that you can talk about, plenty of other jokes that you can do that maybe they're going to find more appealing. And then once you win them back, if you decide you find a clever way to get back to that particular subject, you can do that too. That's something I've had to do. Then tonight, specifically, I was watching Butch Bradley, which if you're not familiar with Butch Bradley, he's a resident headliner at the LA Comedy Club here in Las Vegas at the Strat. And Butch Bradley had a situation because Butch Bradley is a master of crowd work. Butch Bradley, honestly, is probably one of the most underrated comedians in the country, if not the world. Like, Butch Bradley is such an amazing comedian. And tonight, he could have taught a master class in this because what happened was this audience was really rowdy, but in a very supportive way. So the feature had gone up. Jocelyn Sharp, also very funny comedian. She had done really well with them, but she had acknowledged the fact that they were rowdy. But they were rowdy in a very supportive way. She made a joke of that. She handled it in her own way, did really well with them. But then when you get to the headliner, what you also forget with the headliner, or sometimes people don't think about with the headliner, is say an audience is drunk and rowdy through the feature set. Tonight's feature set, I think, was 15 minutes. And so that's what Jocelyn had to do. So by the time that Butch Bradley gets on stage or the headliner gets on stage, they're 15 minutes drunker, or their alcohol has had 15 more minutes to soak in than it was at when Jocelyn got on. And if you're working at a traditional club, because, Vegas runs a little bit different because they run tighter shows in Vegas, so shorter shows, shorter sets. If you're thinking about that in terms of being on the road or in a regular comedy club that's not in Las Vegas, usually the feature is going to do 30 minutes. So then the headliner has to get up and do 45 minutes to an hour after they're a half hour drunker than they were when they first started with the feature. If that makes sense, I think it should. So, Butch is dealing with them at their drunkest, at their most rowdy. And at first he comes out very playful tone, doing well with them. But then it's like something clicked for him and he just realized this audience is wanting to have a different kind of fun than I would give them with just my material. And then he just started destroying this room. Like, it was absolutely an amazing set. And at any point, he could have gotten upset, which is something that some comics do too, where they get mad at the audience and they're like, you guys just don't want to listen. Well, now you've just fucked up your entire set. Anytime you scold the audience like that, you're probably going to end up not having a great set, because even if they decide to be quiet at that point, they're going to be like, okay, well, now we don't know if we can laugh. Now we don't know if we can have fun. It's like the dad's mad type feeling, It's like, oh, dad's mad. We better not get too crazy. And so now you're going to have a silent set. So you're going to get a quiet place to work, which is, I think, what you kind of made the audience think you wanted. But you're not going to have that set that you actually want to have as a comedian, which is to have fun, to kill it. That's more my thinking when it comes to stand-up. Like, yeah, there's my material and there will be times for that. But when it comes down to an audience having a good time versus me getting to do my material quietly in a room full of people, I would rather have the audience have a good time. And so this, again, is where recording also, especially if you're new, will come in handy, because Quinn Dahle had brought this up too. Like, there's certain comedians that get off stage and they're like, that was actually pretty good. And you're like, no, that was terrible. What are you talking about? That was actually pretty good. That was not good at all. But of course you try to be nicer than that, but that's really the way you feel about it, like, how did they not know that that was terrible? They call that laugh ears. That's what people call it when people think they're doing better than they're doing. industry term. So maybe write that down in your little notepad if you're just learning about stand-up. But laugh ears is what that's called. And the only way to get rid of laugh ears is to record your sets and listen back to what's going on and be honest with yourself. I used to teach a guy stand-up one-on-one that would tell me after he would bomb, yeah, they weren't laughing, but they were definitely smiling. And I'm like, yeah, we're not going for smiles. We want audible laughs. So let's correct that thinking. You're not there to just give them a pleasant feeling. You're a comedian. You're supposed to make them laugh. We're supposed to make them laugh. So listen to yourself on the recording and pay attention to the actual audience. Don't only pay attention to your material when you're listening to your playback. Really see what the audience is laughing at, or if they're laughing at all. Sometimes you'll think you had a horrible set. This is where recording helps either way. Because sometimes you'll think you had a horrible set or a bad set, and then you listen back and you're like, they were really having a good time. It must have been in my head. And then sometimes you'll have a so-so set, and it felt like you were killing at the time. But when you actually listen to it, you're like, no, those aren't the actual kind of laughs that I wanted, or they aren't necessarily giving me what it is I wanted to get from them. So, laugh ears can happen to any one of us. It's not like I've never thought I killed it, absolutely destroyed it, and then listened back. And I'll tell you guys, honestly, even at this point in my career, I've been doing this for 17 years now. Like, if you count all the way back to open mic. 17 years I've been doing this, and I still record all of my sets. Like, there's just loads and loads of audio files in my phone. It's very rare. If I forget or I don't have my phone on me, then I won't record my set, obviously. But for the most part, I record every set. I don't listen back as much as I should at this point, but also I feel like I have a better idea of what's happening now. I don't have the nerves that I used to have, so it's easier for me to stay present and actually get a good gauge of what's going on, what's working. But I do need to get back to actually listening more. But I still record every set. So don't at all feel like you're being an amateur by doing that. Some of the best comedians I know are as good as they are. You know who's really good at that is a comedian by the name of Byron Bowers. I don't know if you're familiar with Byron Bowers, but he was on The Chi, so he's an actor as well. And he's an amazing comedian. Really, really funny comedian. But Byron is a person that religiously, well, I haven't performed with him for a while now, but like when we would perform together more often, he would religiously have his earbuds in and he'd listen to a set afterwards, and he'd just be editing and taking things out, putting things in, trying new things, and all of that from listening to a set from before. And it just makes it so it's surgical precision when it comes to your joke delivery and your writing, and I can't recommend it enough. But my main point in all this, I know I've talked about a few things, but I feel like if you really love stand-up and you really want to learn, a lot of this was necessary. And if you have any questions, like always, leave them down below in the comments. I promise I will not judge anything. If you ask me any question, I will do my best to answer it as well as I can. So please don't be shy about asking a question. But when it comes to dealing with the audience and weird audiences or bad audiences, don't get into the bad habit of blaming the audience or thinking it was the audience's fault. Always, 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 even when you do feel like they were hopeless, always continue to think about it and think what you can do to make that situation better for the next time that you're in it. So, just to recap, the 4 things I would say that are the most important on dealing with bad or weird audiences is 1, don't get in the habit of blaming the audience. 2, don't get mad at the audience. 3, make sure you're recording so that you can see what the audience's actual reaction is to everything and whether or not you're reading that correctly in the moment. And 4, don't be too rigid. So those would be the 4 most important things as far as I go when it comes to dealing with weird or bad audiences. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Again, this has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.